Thanks for joining us. I'm Kent Justice, your host for This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. And our episode today looks at a couple of projects in downtown Jacksonville that have celebrated pretty significant progress lately. So joining me from the Jacksonville Daily Record, Brune Mathis, editor-at-large, and Rick Anderson, who's associate editor in government affairs. And this is really cool because there are a couple of projects we're talking about, but it really looks at the bigger scope of development in downtown. And Rick, I was mentioning this is the first time you and I have got to meet each other, but I enjoy very much reading the coverage that you're providing there. And let's talk about some of these events. I know they were 2 days apart, but let's start with what's happening. Gateway Jacks, and they did a big groundbreaking.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and it's great to meet you, and really appreciate what you're doing with the program here.
Thank you.
So Gateway Jacks on October 28th held a groundbreaking for what they're calling their Pearl Square, which is the first part of their first phase of their bigger development, which, if the whole thing gets built out, would be about a $2 billion investment into downtown Jacksonville.
And Karen, we've talked individually about this. We've had, I think I mentioned, I've had the leaders of these developments on our show as well. This is in the downtown's North Core district, kind of near City Hall. What's it mean to you as you're covering this and watching these that those steps actually are being taken, right?
They are, and I think
not just proposals anymore.
Not just, there are renderings, as we like to say, but the big element in this is that the developers own the property. They've assembled the property, they own the property, so they do have an investment in it and want to see it work. And I think that's what gives us the expectation that we are going to see this happen. This is a part of Jacksonville up by City Hall and up kind of by the Lighthouse Garage. It's all in that area that really hasn't had a lot of attention in a long time. And so this is really going to build a new center of activity in downtown Jacksonville. And I think that's what we're going to see.
Is this property that was purchased from First Baptist Church down there, or it's adjacent to what that big block of land is?
It's been purchased from several buyers. We've been kind of tracking this over the years, and we're like, whoa, you know, this is really going to be something. And we all know the name Alex Safakis in Jacksonville, and he is one of those who has assembled this property. And I believe it's a total of, is it 22 acres?
I believe it's 28 acres over 24 different properties.
And they keep assembling it. So this is a lot of property downtown. And a lot of this is going to be developed eventually into the entire Gateway Jacks.
So Gateway Jacks, the principal there is Brian Mull. And as we visited with him on the program, you may know, but he led the Water Street Tampa downtown redevelopment. Something that was widely praised and has been pretty successful there. Also the Amazon HQ2 national landing site there in Washington, D.C. So Brian Mull is one of those developers who's, hey, I've got a resume. I've succeeded already. So it gives some confidence, I think, for the assembled dignitaries who are there at groundbreaking to say, good, we're really behind this, right?
That's true. And I think the fact that you have some out-of-town investment associated with some in-town investment and financing does bring a much broader scope to confidence that this is going to happen.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit, and we'll talk more details on Gateway Jacks, but let's talk a little bit about Phoenix, the Phoenix district there. The Phoenix district, so they did a ribbon cutting, proposed $37.9 million. This is the Phoenix Arts and Innovation District that we've talked about, North Springfield area, and their ribbon cutting happened the day after the groundbreaking, so obviously just 1 day apart, some of the same dignitaries in both of those places to say we're celebrating some progress.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that those did happen so closely together was a meaningful thing. You know, I think that when we get down the road and look back, and assuming that, you know, downtown redevelopment does start happening in kind of a critical mass way, I think those two events back to back will kind of be remembered. But yeah, that was a grand opening of what they're calling their Emerald Station, which is an adaptive reuse of an old warehouse building that now includes some offices, like a catering kitchen and an event space where they'll hold community events and so forth.
I thought it'd be important to talk maybe on this part of it. Hey, how are these developed? And Rick, you were just laying out some of that. This second project we're talking about, the Phoenix Art District, they're using some structures that are already there and then remaking them a little bit.
They sure are. They have purchased, I think it's almost 9 acres, 8 to 9 acres in that area, and a lot of it is old warehouses that have not been used. And there is some, some properties, some parking lots and things. And they're really assembling this as a district as well. And again, it's reuse. It's reuse of property that has had no use in a long time, or very little use.
So that's why you cut a ribbon there and you break ground on the other one, Rick.
Yeah, right. It was just a different phase in the process. Gateway got started a little bit later than Phoenix did. And Phoenix is much smaller in scale, obviously, than Gateway is. The first phase of Gateway involves, I think, $98.5 million worth of city incentives. It's about a $400 million project, just that first phase. And, as you mentioned earlier, Phoenix is just a much smaller scale than that.
Yeah, Tony chose the developer there, CEO of Miami-based Future of Cities. And when we talk to him, I mean, it's pretty clear that he's kind of this visionary. He's this, I've got a great idea. But the energy that he brings to it is really tangible. Have you experienced that in interviewing him?
Yeah, him and other people about him. So, that came up several times during their opening, just speaker after speaker saying, thank you for bringing this energy into our community and so forth.
And he's been in town for a while, kind of building his relationship with that community to make sure that the community knows what he's doing and that he does what the community needs to be done in that area. So he's been here for a while, and I know he talked about that with you, but that's an important element in rejuvenating or renovating any older area.
Yeah, I've lived here 14 years, and obviously those of us who've been here a little bit know that so often there are plans, there are designs, there are renderings, and then projects don't happen. So I know that the mayor of Jacksonville, Donna Deegan, was at both of those events, and as you reported, she was saying that back in the day, she was telling you that when she was a little girl, downtown was all that. I think this is very exciting for her and city council members and people who love the city and want to see the growth finally happen, refurbishing things. We'll see what happens with the Laura Street Trio someday, but these are two projects that could signify to others, oh yeah, not just open for business, but getting things done.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think that was another common theme during the two events, which was, we have developers who have had successes elsewhere who are now not only interested in downtown Jacksonville and nearby, but are actually putting money into it, and we're seeing things happen. And maybe that can be, a bell for others to come in.
And I think one of the announcements we're all waiting for are the announcements by Brian Mall and Gateway Jacks of who some of those first retail and commercial tenants will be, because he's talked about a grocery store, they've talked about a fitness center, and they've talked about other elements. And I think once those are announced and those leases are signed, that'll be yet another major sign that this may happen.
Yeah, it makes sense that something as big as Gateway, these 28 acres and 24 city blocks and what have you, that they'd have to take it in chunks. But I appreciate what you just said. Those first folks who say, yep, I'm in, and I'm hanging the shingle outside, and I'm opening it up for people to move in, all of those kinds of things will give it some more energy. Rick, you pointed out in the article that I read, I thought an important question. Will the developers actually finish the project? Because as you were pointing out, at Gateway Jacks at that event, so that's Church and Julia Streets, people standing right there didn't have to look very far to see, let me see, you mentioned the Ambassador Hotel, the Independent Life Building, both projects that were abandoned by developers after even getting permits and getting city incentives.
Yeah, that's right. And I think Jimmy Peluso, the councilman whose district includes that site and also includes the Phoenix site, put it well. I said, Councilman, you can see right across the street a sign that, there was a project that got started, but is, by all appearances, is not going to be finished by this developer. And he said, well, that's the difference between developers. The developers for the Ambassador and the Independent Life, just didn't have the capability that a Brian Mall does of putting together the capital stack that is needed. And then all of, the know-how to go through processes and the political know-how to get things approved. And that's the difference. That's why you're seeing motion forward on Gateway and maybe not on those other projects.
And I think another note of all that we're going to see playing out, as Rick can tell you, is that the incentives were approved, but they weren't issued. No incentives money had gone to that project. They were approved, and a lot of this is built in so that once the project is complete, that's when the incentive money is issued. And that we're seeing a shift in that too, that Rick might want to talk about. City Council has really taken a new tack on how to do that.
I did want to talk about that because we know that again, you're reporting here, but council approved almost $100 million for Pearl Square. Maybe talk us through some of that and what the new approach is by City Council on incentives.
Yeah, so the traditional approach involves mostly what are called REV grants, or recapture enhanced value grants, and that is just a rebate on additional tax money that is generated by an improvement in a property. So, if I put on a new bedroom on my house or an addition on my house, it's worth more, I'm going to pay more in property tax. This would be like the city coming back to me and saying, thank you for doing that. We're going to rebate you 50% of that tax increase or whatever. And then the other one is a completion grant. That's the most standard, where I finish my project, I do it on time. City says, great, here's your money that we promised you. What the City Council is doing now is, because of some budgetary restrictions, they are saying, wait a minute, what about these completion grants? Are we overcommitting ourselves? Are we going to put too much strain on the city budget? So I think council members are looking at these things a lot more closely maybe than they used to.
Yeah, and they're focusing more on those REV grants now rather than any of the cash grants that might be issued.
Is it possible that City Council would decide that there's a cap on the incentives, or that they would direct Downtown Investment Authority, hey, you can only give out so much, now you decide how to spread those out among the projects?
That's come up.
It has. You may have heard of the Special Committee on the Future of Downtown, which was put together earlier this year. And that was one of the questions that came up early in their process was, should the DIA just be given a pot of money and say, that's what you get for the year, dole it out as you see fit, but there's no more after that?
What's the reasoning behind that on City Council? Hey, we don't want individual projects to keep asking us for more money, or how would you describe that?
Well, right now, there really isn't a cap on the number of projects or the amount of incentives that can be negotiated. And I think that just what Rick said about the budget issues, should we have a cap on that, not knowing how this will affect the general fund?
Both of you covering on a daily basis, covering the stories that are happening in Jacksonville. We know that there is a growing list of projects. There's a number of things happening. Somebody asked me the other day, not just about driving over the Main Street Bridge and seeing the latest and greatest yacht for Shad Khan, but hey, that the building, the Four Seasons, is under construction over there. What are some of those projects that you see in kind of downtown 7 main districts, maybe Springfield as well, that are happening right now or about to?
Well, I think one thing we can tell everybody to read the Daily Record this week and find out a little bit more.
I like that.
But, Rick, you just went through that report, but there's a lot happening within downtown. But when you extend it into Springfield, which isn't part of downtown, but then you have Brooklyn and you have a lot of areas that maybe you don't think about being downtown, they actually are in the downtown overlay and they do qualify for incentives. And there are a lot of projects proposed.
That's right. If you just go downtown, the traditional kind of core of downtown, like around the City Hall and Laura Street Trio, you won't see some of the things that are happening, like the One Riverside project in Brooklyn, which I can't remember the exact investment on that, but that's on the old Times Union site. You won't see the Four Seasons, Kent, that you were talking about, that's adjacent to the stadium. You won't see a lot of the crane work that's going on. You might see the Riverfront Plaza, which is a public investment, turning what used to be the landing site into a public plaza and a park.
And that's like $38 million just on that project right there.
Right.
JTA, they are working on this Ultimate Urban Connector, the U2C project.
The urban circulator.
So this, yes, exactly. Thank you. But that's tens of millions of dollars in the work right there as well, right?
Mm-hmm. And
It
you
is,
went
yeah.
to a ground, was it a ribbon cutting or not a ground break? You
I
went to
wasn't
two.
able to make it that day, but I was able to report on it. They are building their headquarters for that system as an automated
And that's
people
Lavilla,
mover
is that
system.
right?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes. And they did a topping off ceremony for that. So that project is happening very quickly, coming out of the ground.
Yeah, and back to the One Riverside, I found your notes, $250 million.
There you go.
Mixed-use development there. Of course, we'll see it eventually. The plans are in place. It's been approved by the NFL, but we've got this Everbank Stadium renovation that's that's coming as well. Lots and lots and lots of money tied up in that one.
There is, and they're really starting to kick off the actual construction planning process. And they have some permits to do some little site groundwork, and they're having meetings with contractors who want to bid, and so they're letting out the bids and they're negotiating with all of the contractors for that, so that once the season is over, they can start in on that. And okay, you can comment on that.
They're still playing games, but a lot of us are like, this season's over.
Once the last game of the season is played there, that's when you're going to start seeing some work being done.
Yeah, it's something that there's a lot of hope surrounding. Of course, there was a lot of hope surrounding what would happen on a football field this year that has gone unrealized.
Well, and also within that area, you have the Armada Stadium. They're getting ready to break ground on that. Well, once they have to do the land, they have to get the land from the city, but they're getting ready to build the Armada Stadium.
Now, so remind me, I remember hearing about it, but where would that be located? Is that where the fairgrounds are
It's going to be
depart?
north. It's going to be
North
on the
there.
other side of the Arlington Expressway. It's going to be up in that area. It's going to be closer into the east side area.
Okay. What's the timeline on that? I guess I don't realize.
That's going to be a couple years.
Yeah, a few
They
years,
want to
right?
play quickly. I think they want to play by the end of next year, but it's really going to depend on all the permitting and the construction and getting that finished.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate the time. I know we covered a whole bunch of topics there, but for listeners and viewers, this partnership that we have with the Jacksonville Daily Record is something that we hope benefits you as well. As Karen mentioned, if you want to go out and go in depth, you find their website and the articles that you've got. But I appreciate the time. Rick, great to get to meet you today. Rick Anderson and Karen Brune Mathis, both from the Jacksonville Daily Record. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
And just a reminder, as I thank you for joining us on This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition, we want you to like, follow, subscribe, wherever you're getting your podcast. And a reminder that new episodes come out every Thursday at 9 a.m. Thanks for joining us.